Now it's time for Tech24, and today we're looking at the state of cyber communications in Ukraine. For this, I'm joined by Peter O'Brien. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Max.
The day after Russia invaded, you were talking about how the fourth battlefield would be cyberspace. Are you still standing by this?
It's a good question. I'd say that it is still an ongoing and a crucial part of this conflict, but I did perhaps overestimate Russia's ability to overwhelm Ukraine's communications using cyber weaponry, certainly in the first steps of this war. I think it's safe to say that analysts in general overestimated Russia's ability to make any sort of progress. I mean, we've seen how their troops have been bogged down. We've seen that they've failed to get air superiority. Well, it's clear now that they also don't really have cyberspace superiority either, and this means that they're also far from crippling Ukraine's communications. NetBlocks is an internet activity monitor, and it's noticed that the number of devices connected to the internet in Ukraine has dropped, but only by about a quarter since the invasion began. So things could have been a lot worse.
Why is this? I mean, has Russia tried and failed in the cyber front, or has it just simply not tried at all?
Well, there are lots of theories, and the France 24 debate went over a few of them last week. To name some of the main ones, Ukraine's cyber defences have obviously seen a vast amount of investment in the last few years, not just domestically but internationally as well. And cyber attacks are obviously long and costly to plan. Maybe Russia just thinks that bombs are the most efficient way to knock out infrastructure at this point. On the flip side, some are saying that Russia needs communications to be working in Ukraine so that its own forces can exploit them, and also so it can keep spreading disinformation on Ukrainian channels. I would caveat all of this, though, by saying that the character and scale of a cyber attack takes some time to reveal. For instance, tens of thousands of modems belonging to the US satellite internet company Viasat were knocked out across Europe and in Ukraine at the start of the invasion. But actually, we're only just finding out about the details of this. Ukrainian authorities only recently told us that this was a massive blow to their communications actually at the start of the war. And it was only in the last couple of days that we've learned that the hack is actually likely still ongoing, and it's likely the result of a wiper virus called acid rain.
So what happened to the global cyber war that you were warning us all about?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity experts were saying that if there's a massive cyber attack, it could spill across borders and cause a global cyber war. I would argue that in some ways we're seeing this happening with Viasat because, as I say, it knocked out modems across Europe. Also, that included almost 6,000 wind turbines in Germany that it knocked offline as well. But as to why we haven't seen a sort of wider cyber fallout, well, some are saying that perhaps we've reached a kind of mutually assured destruction where one side doesn't want to be the first one to throw the first stone, and maybe Russia doesn't want to attract a massive cyber retaliation. It's already facing a lot of problems domestically, as we've just been hearing. But I'd say don't rule it out yet, because in recent years, we've certainly seen that Russia isn't really afraid to sponsor cyber attacks that have caused widespread destruction globally.
And coming back to Ukraine, if the cyber offensive moves up a notch, what options do Ukrainians have in terms of maintaining communications?
Well, the first thing to note is that the internet is going to be very hard to knock out. The Economist reports that Ukraine has the fourth least concentrated internet market, which means it has a very high number of internet service providers. That means its internet is less vulnerable as a whole because there are fewer points of failure. And there's also solidarity between these companies. We've heard that repair crews have been going out and repairing their competitors' equipment, for instance. If the internet does fail in certain places, well, there are alternative means of communicating. The same report says that 15,000 amateur shortwave radio stations already exist in Ukraine, and many of them have now pivoted to assisting Ukrainian military and intelligence. And of course, then there are the 2,000 internet satellites belonging to Starlink and Elon Musk.
So are Ukrainians actually using Starlink, Peter?
Well, it appears they are. there's been some confusion about this. Many seem to think that his satellite internet terminals, thousands of which have been shipped to Ukraine in the last few weeks, were a donation for free. But we know now that that's actually not really the case. Starlink's president has indicated that private donors and even the governments of France and Poland have contributed to funding this. There's also a controversy over whether the terminals actually pose a security risk. Musk himself suggested that this might be the case. The extent to which you can camouflage them is under debate, and even if you can cover them up with something, well, they still remain detectable to electronics. What is undeniable, though, is that they are indeed proving very useful. So not only are Ukrainian civilians using them to remain in contact in parts of the country which have otherwise been knocked offline, well, the military is also using them to connect to military drones and strike Russian positions.
And not to